So welcome to tonight's episode of Real People. We have two guests tonight. One is Dave Arcari, who's a blues man, and the first guest is Bill Heaney, who's a journalist, or has been most of your days, I think. Can you just tell us, Bill, welcome by the way to the show, how did you start in journalism?
Well, I started in journalism more or less as a mistake because I was supposed to be going to become an engineer with Durans out in Glasgow Road. But I really didn't fancy that, and there was a guy who worked there called Chick Gordon, who was a local comedian, and he had contacts with famous names in journalism at that time, like Archie McCulloch of the Evening Citizen, whose wife was Cathy Kay, who was quite a famous Scottish singer. So they had contacts in the Express, and they said, Bill, look, you could go up there and see them. So I went and saw them. I thought I was starting as a reporter on the Daily Express. I got up to Albion Street and discovered that I was a copy boy, you know. That,
right, so it wasn't what we were expecting.
Yeah, it wasn't quite what I expected. And they said, so what you had to do there was run about with copy and get people cups of tea and get them their lunch and all the rest of it for the reporters. Mm-hmm. So that was me. That's how I got my foot in on the ladder.
What was the stage then from the copy boy to the reporter?
So from being a copy boy, I got a job as a telephonist, you know, answering the phone, Scottish Daily Express, an Evening Citizen, and that was me for a wee while, and I started writing stories. And the guy, a job came up on the news desk, and I got a job as a reporter there with Ian Brown. And
what sort of things were you reporting on then?
Well, initially it was, generally everything. I mean, I think at that time there was something big happening in Loch Lomond in regard to the initial stuff with music. Right. And so I wrote a couple of pieces, and one of the things that I did was I did an interview with Mick Jagger. You know, a face-to-face job after, I think it was Green's Playhouse.
Yeah, which became the Apollo, didn't it?
Which became the Apollo that we were in, and Mick Jagger and his mates were there. So I went into the dressing room afterwards and interviewed him. But the only local line that I could get, you know, to take it, everything for a local paper has got to have something local in it. And Mick Jagger was wearing a Dumbarton football shirt. You know, well, I don't know what it was a Dumbarton football shirt, but it was black and gold hoops.
Okay, that'll do.
You know, so that was it. So I spoke to him. I did a piece for this column in The Reporter, the county reporter, which had just started at the time. And so that was me off and running. And as I say, Mick had his black and gold. I don't know whether he gave me my first big break or I gave him it, you know. It's a bit
well,
like
let's
that.
think, you know, you gave him. But so then you went on to other papers after that?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I worked for Fitzgerald Owens, which was a local news agency in Church Street, and I covered in Church Street, Dumbarton, and we covered Loch Lomond and Dumbarton, which at that time was a fabulous place for news stories. You had Denny's Shipyard, you had the whisky industry. Dumbarton at that time was the capital of Scotch whisky. You know, Scotch whisky can only be made in Scotland, and Dumbarton had the biggest distillery in all of Scotland. Yeah. So it was Hiram Walker at that time, later became Allied Distillers. And things like that. So then, I mean, I had done that for quite some time, and I became the editor of The Reporter and shifted from The Reporter. Then the Express asked me to come back, and so I went back, and I worked at Albion Street in Glasgow and did a lot of stuff there, and then I was posted to Prestwick to cover Ayrshire, but the main part of that job was covering Prestwick Airport, which at that time was Scotland's international airport. and it was where all the film stars had, came through whenever they were coming to the UK. And the guy whom I just missed was Elvis Presley. Because Elvis, on his way back from Germany, where he was posted with the army, he flew into Prestwick, and a couple of my pals.
I didn't actually realise he was.
Well, they interviewed Elvis at Prestwick Airport, and I think that there was until recently an Elvis Presley bar. The bar in the concourse was named after Elvis Presley. But at that time, I did interviews with a lot of famous people coming through there. We had a trick. That these guys, they never like to be, spotted as they go through the airport and so on. So
almost like a kind of slightly paparazzi.
How they all prove the paparazzi. They thought we were at it, but we were really at it because what we did when we couldn't find them was we went along to the information desk and said to the girl, "Do you think you could page this guy to come and see you?" So whoever it was came down the stairs or wherever he'd been, and he came up to the information desk. Then we had them. And it didn't matter whether they were big movie stars or criminals or whatever, but that was what we did.
And you got a couple of words usually out of them.
Yeah.
Did you ever get short shrift from some of the big ones?
Oh, you did, but usually it was until you said hello. And because they're all desperate for publicity anyway. Not necessarily. People like Frank Sinatra wasn't desperate for publicity, but a lot of them were. One who wasn't was Jimmy Logan, who was very famous here, and he got married to Gina Frattini, I think her name was. It was a very famous designer, clothes designer, fashion person. Right. And I think he got married in America, and when they flew back in, they were given the President Eisenhower suite at Culzean Castle. Right. Because Eisenhower used to go there and play golf, and of course the American Air Force were based at Prestwick at that time. So that was it. So we got the job of trying to track down Jimmy Logan and Gina Frattini and do an interview and some pictures. But we spent the whole night sleeping in the car outside.
Ironically,
outside Culzean Castle. So that was us. So we were paparazzi a bit at that time.
Ironically, I met Jimmy Logan once in Dumbarton.
Yeah, well,
he was at a wedding at the Abbotsford actually.
He lived in Helensburgh. He got married eventually to a woman in Helensburgh, and funnily enough, their sons were caught up in some international incident. Yeah. I think Mackenzie was in it. Right. And it was at the start of the Ukraine war.
As recent as that? Okay.
They had set up business there. And they had to get out of the place. So,
Just talk about the wee book for a minute, a big book. This kind of covers a lot of the time in the press, doesn't it? A lot of the time.
Well, it covers a lot of the time, but that book is mainly based on the Lennox area, Dumbartonshire. People like Patrick Telfer Smollett, Sir Hugh Fraser, all kinds of personalities then, and about places where people worked, and
it's a great read actually if you want a book
and played
about local sort of happenings and people. It's a nice.
Yeah, well, and we took people from all walks of life. I just opened it up for Arthur McWatt, who was well known to a lot of people because he worked in the brew, as we called it, in the employment exchange in Station Road, as it was. It became McCafferty's pub, and it's now something else. But Arthur was well known to everybody, but I didn't know you'd been.
I noticed Clint Eastwood in that as well, is he not?
Sorry?
Did you not meet Clint Eastwood as well at one point? At Cameron House or something?
Oh, I did interview him. In fact, I discovered just the other week, somebody sent me a picture, you know, an email, and there was a picture with it, which was a picture that had been taken on the wall of me interviewing.
That's it, yeah. I've seen that somewhere. I don't know. I've seen it.
Interviewing Clint Eastwood. So, well.
And the wall that goes round the kind of circular bit,
Yeah,
front door.
and the staff tell me that you know, when people come in and are going past, they ask, "Who's that guy with Bill Heaney?"
Of course. Yeah, and finally, Bill, just really, what have you been doing the last few years?
I started off working at in politics on the side of that, and I became the special advisor and media advisor to John McFall, who's Lord McFall now, who was at that time chairman of the Treasury Select Committee, and that was a huge crisis. That was in 2008, and we had all like Fred the Shred and all these bankers all being brought in and made to answer for what they had done. When I left McFall, I joined David Martin, who was the Vice President of the European Parliament. So I did some time in Brussels as well. And I finished up as a special advisor to the First Minister of Scotland, who at that time was Henry McLeish, and then the roof fell in on him, and I did it for Jack McConnell just for a short time, and then came back here.
It seems you've had a really colourful career, actually. And can you give, finally, just to finish this off, can you give any advice to say somebody who's going to be young, want to get into journalism? What would you say?
Well, journalism has completely changed, and all the papers are not selling what they did. I mean, when I was in the Daily Express, it was selling 750,000 copies a day. Wow. The Daily Record was selling 600,000 copies. There was easy entry. Like, I went in as a copy boy. You didn't. I mean, what the guy said to me, well, at the Express was, you know, all these university guys are not much use at this game, at knocking doors and speaking to people. He said, what we really need are hooligans who can write. You know?
Hooligans who can write, there you are.
So that was how we got going. And eventually, I mean, I did reasonably well locally. I mean, I won the Journalist of the Year award, I think, four times.
Wow.
So for Scotland. And I was runner-up down south. And on that occasion, I went to the Savoy Hotel for the award. Mm-hmm. And I had met a guy called Peter O'Toole, who's a very famous actor. I met him at a pub in Connemara. So he was there, I knew him. So I went into this hotel, the Savoy Hotel in London, to pick up this award, and I heard this big Irish voice saying, you know, big, deep Irish voice, you know, talking to all these lawyers from across the road at the Old Bailey. And I said, Peter O'Toole, I said, I haven't seen you since we met in Sweeney's Bar in Connemara. And the big guy turned around and he said, I know Sweeney's Bar and I know Connemara very well. He said, but I'm not Peter O'Toole. And I said, oh, for God's sake, what'll I do here? I said, oh, well, if you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. And I went off to the toilet.
What's him though?
So when I come back to the toilet, the photographer and a few guys are standing around there. And this young photographer, Brian Hickey, said to me, I see you were speaking to Richard Harris over there.
No wonder he was a wee bit annoyed then.
So that was, and when he went out, all these journalists were all along the bar having a drink. And he got up to go, he lived there, Richard Harris, he lived in the Savoy Hotel. Right. And when he got up to go, all the journalists had all heard the story along the bar and they're all shouting, bye, Peter. And so that was one of the more interesting times.
Well, thanks for coming in. I just want to say, can people still get a copy of this book?
Yeah, if they're right. I think the details are in it, but it's sold out the initial couple of times I tried. But
maybe if
I've written other books.
Yeah.
Some people say the follow-up was better than the first one.
Yeah.
some people, and I've written a book about Connemara, which includes the
Have you
Peter
got a
O'Toole
website or
stuff.
somewhere people can find
Well, it is. I mean, I now do the Democrat, the Dumbarton Democrat,
Yeah.
which is a kind of it's a local newspaper, but a local national newspaper, because I think that as the world changes, that doing the completely local thing. Everybody's on the radio, television, everybody hears things all the time. And really, you're not telling anybody for the first time. What happens is that they hear it and they want to know more about it. And if they find out, they can find out more about it if they go into the Dumbarton Democrat.
Okay.
And it's at democratonline.net.
Okay, that's fine. Bill, thank you very much for coming in.
No problem.
you'll ever find.
So that was Dave Arcari, and we're going to talk to the man himself. Welcome, Dave, to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's okay. First of all, you're known to me certainly as a blues guy. Is that how you describe yourself?
I kind of guess it's the squarest peg to try and push that in. You know, my music has got as much to do with trash country, punk and rockabilly as it does pre-war Delta blues. But because it's predominantly, not all slide guitar stuff, But because it's predominantly slide guitar stuff, and a lot of my influences are the pre-war Delta blues guys, it probably fits closest into the blues Americana kind of mashup.
And you play all over the place. I mean, you play in America, you play in Scandinavia.
Yep.
And I'm probably missing out a lot of other countries.
A lot, mainland Europe, Scandinavia, a lot in the States until COVID. COVID, my last visa ran out during COVID, and it's an expensive, time-consuming process sorting all out the visa stuff.
So you've not been back since then to the States?
No, we're working on it at the moment actually. So probably 2025, I think, realistically, it will be.
Get back in there and boot it.
But it's no bad thing, because almost felt that from about 2013, put so much. It's a great market for me, America, but put so much emphasis and focus on it. Probably neglected the UK and Europe a little bit. So this kind of almost forced, take a step back and reconsider everything has been a good thing, certainly in the UK.
Okay, just rewinding right back. How did you get started in all this?
By mistake.
Aye.
No, I started playing guitar when I left school. I was working in a bank, talking to square
Can't
peg.
imagine you working in a bank.
We were talking about square pegs and round holes a minute ago. There's a perfect example. Only did it for a couple of years. Then I was a debt collector in Glasgow, out Castle Milk Easter House at 11:30 on a Friday night. That
must have been funny.
Dodgy.
Aye.
But that light, I saw the light, so they say. And anyway, when I was working in the bank, I bought a guitar, an acoustic guitar with my Christmas bonus one year. And I was never allowed to do music at school because I was tone deaf, I couldn't sing, you're rubbish. And I was only allowed to be in the choir in primary school if I moved my lips and didn't make a noise.
Really?
It's interesting, all the things I couldn't do at school I ended up making a living from. That's another story.
Yeah, it's a message for us all.
But so I started playing guitar when I was about 18. I was into Bob Dylan and Neil Young and the kind of stuff I suppose now people would gravitate towards. I was going to say Oasis, but Oasis are golden oldies now. Maybe Ed Sheeran, for instance, or Billie Eilish, or whatever. People gravitate towards the kind of music they can maybe identify with and see themselves playing. So I started playing Bob Dylan, Neil Young, but none of my pals played instruments. So my sense of timing was non-existent, really. I was going to say it was bad, but it wasn't even bad. It just wasn't there to start with.
So you never played in a band then?
Well, subsequently I did, but it took. I didn't start my first band till I was about 22, 23. And that was when I realised, no, I can't just change chords and stuff when I want to. And I've got to try and count. Wait a minute, I can't count. At least feel it. Have some idea. Be consistent. So, and as it would be at that point, being a guitar player in the starting out in the 80s, blues was the easiest kind of music to, because it's a fairly.
And you never played a guitar before you bought this guitar?
No, no. So I think I got a boot. It wasn't a tune a day, but it was something like that. So it was blowing in the wind and leaving in a jet plane. Tell a lie, actually, I did tinker a bit with guitar about primary 6. And I remember a group of 5 or 6 of us going into the school dinner hall with the guitar teacher, and everybody had guitars that were far too big. Couldn't reach over them. And it was like, Jingle Bells, and she'll be coming round the mountain. And it was
still classics.
Yeah, not the way really to engage a kid in music though, is it? It was like So that lasted a few weeks, and then it was like, nah.
But then you rekindled interest by getting the guitar, and you've now moving on. Obviously you do all the touring, you perform yourself really just nowadays.
Majority of the stuff is solo. I mean, I've had a few bands over the years. My first band was Summerfield Blues, and then I tried to do the solo thing but accidentally ended up with a trio which was called Radio Tones, which was actually largely what I still do, except without the bass and the drums and the harmonica. So it's just basically I am Radio Tones without the other guys.
I've seen that on stage. You can move about a bit.
So
that's great. Can we have a look at? You've got a signature guitar out now, which is not many of us have got that kind of thing going on. Can we have a look at it?
Absolutely.
It's a different kind of guitar, isn't it?
It is. It's from a company made by a company called National Resophonic.
Okay, just watch it yourself.
And National are based in California, and they started out in the early 20th century, 1920s.
Right.
With the idea, there was no electric guitars, so their idea was to make a guitar based on what was happening in Hawaii and the islands music that was loud enough to be heard when it was played with other people,
Right.
or
Without being mic'd up.
because there was nothing like that in the 20s. So you couldn't, there was no Fender Strats or Telecasters you could plug in and turn up to 11. So basically the idea is that this guitar's made of metal, although the specific finish on this does look a bit like wood. Mm-hmm. That's part of the signature guitar. But underneath this bit here is what is effectively like an aluminium pie dish.
Right.
And it's like a mechanical speaker. Mm-hmm. So the idea of this construction was to make something that was much, much louder than a normal acoustic guitar. Mm-hmm. And it would also let, if there was a lot of the blues guys in the Delta at the 1920s, pre-Second World War certainly, gravitated towards these instruments because they were loud enough they were maybe playing in a noisy juke joint or a noisy equivalent of a noisy pub.
So they had to shout loud and play loud.
And these cut through the noise.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. That's great. So have you got a couple of these guitars then yourself?
This is the Dave Arcari signature model, which is a story in itself. But I've actually been playing National guitars probably for nearly 30 years.
Wow, okay.
So I have quite a few of them for the last 20 years. I've had an artist deal with National Brazophonic as an endorsement.
Good.
And I'm also an artist dealer for them, although there's not much call for that in the UK.
You never know.
But so I have an embarrassingly large number of guitars that they have built for me.
Okay, fantastic. Just to end off, really, to wind things up a wee bit, have got any gigs come up we can come and see you locally or?
There are locally in April or May. I have a show at the Tall Booth in Stirling.
Okay.
I've got a pal coming over from Estonia to be my special guest at that.
Magic.
In March, I have a show at Buchanan Memorial Hall on the eastern shores of Loch
I know
Lomond.
where you are, yes.
Just at
before
Milton
Balmaha.
Buchanan. Yes, just at Milton Buchanan, so about a mile short of Balmaha.
Yep.
There's a village hall there, Buchanan Memorial Hall, that we usually put on a show there once a year. Mm-hmm. It's a great old school kind of place.
Yep.
Put in a PA, put in some lights.
I was actually at Kilmarnock Church, and I think they said you'd played there.
Yes, just last July.
Past
yes.
Garahan, yeah.
That was interesting. I was involved with something in Kilmarnock that was nothing to do with music, and somebody who was involved with the old kirk asked if I would consider, would you be interested in playing? And I said, yeah, let's have a look at the place. It was completely unplugged.
Could be a great venue.
It was absolutely fantastic. I didn't get turned into a pillar of salt.
So Dave, I just want to say thanks very much for coming in and bringing the guitar. Is there anywhere, your website or something, people can find out where you're playing and where they can maybe buy your CDs and things?
Yeah, for sure. The hub of everything is my website, which is davearcari.com, DAVEARCARI.com. Everything's there. The store, the gig guide, you name it.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, man.
Okay. Well, finally, I just want to say thanks very much to Bill Heaney for coming in and to my second guest, Dave Arcari, bluesman extraordinaire from outer space, he says. Thanks again, Dave, and thanks for watching.